Have you ever had your entire world turned upside down by a single, shattering revelation? I'm talking about the kind of secret that rips through everything you thought you knew about yourself, leaving you questioning your identity, your family, and every memory you've ever held dear. That's exactly what happened to me when I discovered that my own mother, the woman who raised me, who I thought loved me unconditionally, had been hiding a devastating lie for my entire life. She told someone I wasn't her child, and when I stumbled upon that truth, it broke me in ways I can't even begin to describe. How do you cope when the person who's supposed to be your rock turns out to be the source of your deepest pain? I'm still reeling from the fallout, trying to piece together who I am and what this means for my future. This isn't just a story about a lie. It's about betrayal, heartbreak, and the desperate search for answers in a sea of doubt. Stick with me as I unravel the emotional chaos, the memories that now feel tainted, and the shocking twist that changed everything I thought I knew. You won't believe how far this deception went or the raw truth I uncovered along the way. I need to share this with you, not just to vent, but to figure out how to move forward, and I could really use your thoughts on this mess. I grew up in a small, tight-knit community in rural Montana, a place called Willow Creek, where the mountains loom like silent guardians and the winters are so harsh they test your very soul. It's the kind of town where everyone knows your name, your business, and probably your great-grandparents' stories too. My childhood was a mix of wide-open fields, endless summers spent exploring the woods with my friends, and long, quiet evenings by the fireplace in our creaky old farmhouse. I'm 32 now, but back then, life felt simpler, even if it wasn't always easy. My name's Ethan, by the way, and I've always been a bit of a loner, more comfortable fixing engines in my garage than making small talk at the local diner. But family was everything to me. Or at least, I thought it was. My mom, Clara, was the center of my world growing up. She was a single parent after my dad passed away in a logging accident when I was just 3. I don't remember much about him, just vague impressions of a deep laugh and the smell of pine on his clothes, pieced together from old photos and mom's stories. She worked 2 jobs, days at the town library and nights waitressing, to keep us afloat, and I always admired her grit. She wasn't perfect. She could be distant sometimes, lost in her own thoughts, and there were days when her temper flared over the smallest things. But I chalked it up to stress, to the weight of raising me on her own. She'd hug me tight after those moments, her voice soft as she apologized, and I'd feel safe again. I never doubted her love, not for a second. She was my anchor, the one constant in a life that often felt uncertain. So when I found out she'd been lying to me, about something as fundamental as who I am, it felt like the ground had been yanked out from under me. The lie didn't come to light in some dramatic confrontation or tearful confession. No, it was much quieter, much more insidious, creeping into my life like a shadow I didn't notice until it was too late. It started about 6 months ago, during a mundane visit to Mom's house. I'd been helping her clean out the attic, a task we'd put off for years because it was stuffed with decades of clutter, old furniture, boxes of faded photographs, and stacks of papers that smelled of dust and time. I was sorting through a pile of letters, half bored and half nostalgic, when I came across an envelope addressed to Mom in a handwriting I didn't recognize. The postmark was from over 30 years ago, just a year after I was born. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it, expecting some mundane family update or a forgotten bill. Instead, what I read made my heart stop. It was a letter from someone named Margaret, thanking Mom for taking him in and expressing relief that the boy would have a good home. There was no name mentioned, but the context was chillingly clear. It talked about an arrangement, a secret kept for the sake of everyone involved, and a promise to never speak of it again. My hands shook as I read it over and over, trying to make sense of the words. Was this about me? Was I the boy? The implications hit me like a punch to the gut, and I sat there on the cold attic floor, surrounded by relics of a life I thought I understood, feeling like a stranger in my own story. I didn't confront Mom right away. How could I? My mind was a whirlwind of doubt and fear, and I wasn't ready to face the possibility that everything I knew about myself might be a lie. Instead, I tucked the letter into my jacket pocket and spent the next few days and a daze, replaying every memory of my childhood through a new, distorted lens. I thought about the times Mom had seemed evasive when I asked about my dad, brushing off questions with vague answers or changing the subject. I remembered how she'd sometimes look at me with this unreadable expression, a mix of sadness and something I couldn't place. Guilt, maybe? I'd always assumed it was grief over losing my father, but now I wondered if it was something else entirely. Was I not her son? Had she adopted me, or taken me in under some secretive arrangement, and never told me? The questions gnawed at me, keeping me up at night as I stared at the ceiling of my small apartment above the garage where I work. I felt betrayed, but also terrified of what the truth might be, and of losing the only family I'd ever known if I pushed too hard for answers. The emotional conflict inside me was suffocating. On one hand, I was furious at the idea that Mom could keep something so monumental from me. If I wasn't her biological child, didn't I deserve to know? Didn't I have a right to understand where I came from, who I really was? The anger burned hot, fueled by a sense of betrayal that cut deeper than anything I'd ever felt. But on the other hand, there was this aching sadness, a longing to believe that her love for me was real, regardless of biology. I kept thinking about all the sacrifices she'd made, the late nights working, the way she'd cheer at my school plays even when she was exhausted, the quiet moments when she'd stroke my hair and tell me I was her whole world. Could that love be a lie? Or was it possible that she'd kept this secret to protect me, to shield me from a truth she thought I couldn't handle? I was torn between rage and a desperate need to hold on to the bond we'd always had, and that inner tug-of-war left me feeling more lost than ever. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed with uncovering the truth, but I did it quietly, almost secretly, as if I was afraid of what I'd find. I started digging through more of Mom's old things when she wasn't home, looking for any clue that might confirm or deny what I'd read in that letter. I scoured photo albums, searching for pictures of her pregnant with me, but there were none, just snapshots of me as a newborn, bundled in her arms, with no hint of the months before. I even went to the county records office under the pretense of researching property history, hoping to find my birth certificate or some adoption paperwork, but everything listed Clara as my mother, with no mention of anything unusual. It should have reassured me, but instead, it only deepened my suspicion. If there was a secret, it had been buried deep, covered up with meticulous care. The more I searched, the more I felt like I was unraveling, my sense of self slipping through my fingers like sand. I started withdrawing from everyone, friends, co-workers, even Mom herself. I couldn't look her in the eye without wondering what she was hiding, and every conversation felt like a minefield, every word loaded with unspoken questions I didn't dare ask. The weight of not knowing was crushing me, but so was the fear of confronting her. What if I asked, and she confirmed my worst fears? What if she told me I wasn't hers, that I'd been taken in out of obligation or pity, not love? Or worse, what if she lied again, denied everything, and left me with even more doubt? I spent hours walking alone along the frozen trails near Willow Creek, the bitter wind biting at my face as I wrestled with these thoughts. I'd always found solace in the quiet of nature, in the way the mountains seemed to hold secrets older than any of us, but now even that felt hollow. I kept remembering a specific moment from when I was about 10, a day when Mom and I had hiked up to a ridge overlooking the town. She'd pointed out the distant peaks, her voice soft as she told me that no matter where I went in life, I'd always have a home here, with her. That memory had always been a comfort, a reminder of her unwavering support, but now it felt tainted. Was that promise real, or just another layer of the facade she'd built around me? The uncertainty was a poison, seeping into every corner of my mind, and I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. When I finally worked up the courage to confront Mom, it wasn't a planned moment. It happened on a gray, snowy afternoon, about 2 months after I'd found the letter. I was at her house, helping her shovel the driveway after a heavy storm, and something inside me just snapped. Maybe it was the way she smiled at me, so familiar and warm, while I stood there feeling like a fraud in my own life. I dropped the shovel, my breath visible in the cold air, and asked her point-blank if I was her son. Her face froze, the smile vanishing as if I'd slapped her, and for a long, agonizing moment, she didn't say anything. That silence was worse than any answer she could have given. It confirmed every fear I'd been carrying. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, telling me we should go inside to talk. My heart was pounding as we sat at her worn kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared countless meals, and I braced myself for whatever she was about to say. What she told me wasn't what I expected, and it turned everything I thought I knew on its head. She admitted that I wasn't her biological child, but not in the way I'd feared. She explained that after my dad died, she'd been in a dark place, struggling with grief and the pressure of raising me alone. She'd confided in a close friend, Margaret, the woman who wrote the letter, about how overwhelmed she felt, how there were days she didn't know if she could be the mother I needed. In a moment of desperation, she told Margaret that she sometimes felt like I wasn't hers, not because I wasn't her son, but because she felt so disconnected, so inadequate, that she couldn't claim that bond. Margaret had misunderstood, or perhaps Mom's words had been more convincing than she intended, and the letter was written under the assumption that I'd been adopted or taken in. But Mom swore to me, tears streaming down her face, that I was hers, born to her, raised by her, loved by her, even if there were times she'd struggled to feel worthy of being my mother. She'd kept that conversation with Margaret a secret, ashamed of her own vulnerability, never imagining it would come back to haunt us like this. That revelation was a bombshell, but not in the way I'd braced for. I wasn't adopted, wasn't some child handed off to her under mysterious circumstances. I was her son, biologically and in every way that mattered. But the lie, the way she'd expressed her doubts to someone else, the way those words had been preserved in ink and hidden away, still cut deep. I sat there, staring at the steam rising from my untouched coffee, feeling a storm of emotions I couldn't name. There was relief, yes, that I wasn't who I'd feared I was, that my roots were still with her. But there was also a fresh wave of hurt. How could she say something like that, even in a moment of weakness. How could she let someone believe, even briefly, that I wasn't hers? And why hadn't she told me about her struggles, trusted me enough to share that pain, instead of letting it fester into a secret that nearly destroyed us? I felt betrayed, not by a lie about my origins, but by the hidden truth of her doubts, by the realization that the unbreakable bond I'd always believed in had cracks I'd never seen. In the days after that conversation, I wrestled with how to process it all. I was angry at Mom for letting those words slip out, for not being honest with me sooner about her struggles. I kept imagining her sitting with Margaret, voicing doubts about being my mother, and it stung in a way I couldn't shake. But I also felt a deep, aching sadness for her, for the weight she'd carried alone after Dad's death, for the guilt she must have felt over those fleeting thoughts. I started to see her in a new light, not just as my unflappable mom, but as a flawed, human woman who'd fought through her own darkness to raise me. I remembered the countless times she'd been there for me, bandaging scraped knees, staying up late to help with homework, celebrating every small victory in my life. And I wondered if I'd taken her strength for granted, never considering the battles she fought behind closed doors. The conflict inside me was raw and unrelenting. I wanted to forgive her, to rebuild the trust that had been shaken, but I also couldn't ignore the pain of knowing she'd once questioned our bond, even if only in a moment of despair. I've spent the last few months trying to navigate this new reality, but it's a slow, uneven process. Mom and I have talked more since that day, peeling back layers of our relationship that we'd never dared to touch before. She's opened up about her grief after Dad died, about the loneliness and fear that sometimes made her feel like she was failing me. I've shared my own hurt, my fear of losing her, and the way this secret, however misunderstood, made me question everything. Some days, those conversations bring us closer, like we're finally seeing each other for who we really are. Other days, they leave me drained, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. I've started spending more time alone, working on my old truck in the garage or hiking the trails around Willow Creek, trying to sort through my feelings without the noise of the world pressing in. I've even started writing letters to Mom, not to send, just to get my thoughts out, pouring out the anger, the love, the confusion, and the hope that we can find our way back to each other. But the truth is, I'm still not sure where we stand. The foundation of our relationship feels different now, like a house that's been through a storm, still standing, but with cracks in the walls that might never fully mend. I keep asking myself if I can truly let go of the hurt, if I can accept that her doubts were a reflection of her pain, not a rejection of me. I wonder if I've been too hard on her, or if I'm justified in feeling this betrayal so deeply. And beneath it all, there's a lingering fear. What if there are other secrets, other doubts she hasn't shared? How do I trust again, knowing that even the strongest bonds can hide such painful truths? I look at old photos of us now, me as a kid, grinning beside her at the county fair, or the two of us bundled up against a Montana blizzard, and I feel a mix of nostalgia and uncertainty. Those moments were real, weren't they? Or have I been seeing our relationship through rose-colored glasses all along? As I sit here now, watching the sun dip below the mountains from the porch of my apartment, I'm still grappling with so many unanswered questions. How do you rebuild trust with someone who's hurt you, even if their intentions weren't malicious? Is it possible to move past a revelation like this, to see my mom as both the woman who raised me and the one who doubted herself so deeply? And what about my own identity? Can I hold on to the sense of belonging I've always felt, or will this shadow of doubt always linger in the back of my mind? I'm trying to find hope in the small steps, the honest talks with Mom, the quiet moments of reflection, the realization that love, even flawed, can still be real. But the path forward feels uncertain, like a trail obscured by fog, and I don't know where it will lead. I'm sharing this story with you because I'm still searching for clarity, still trying to make sense of the pain and the love that coexist in this messy chapter of my life. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed how you saw someone you loved, or even how you saw yourself? How did you navigate the hurt, the doubt, and the longing to hold on to that bond? Maybe you've struggled with trust in your own family, or wrestled with forgiving someone who let you down in a way you never expected. How did you find your way through? I'd love to hear your experiences, your advice, because I believe we can learn from each other's journeys. As I look ahead, I'm left wondering if Mom and I can truly heal, if we can rebuild something stronger from this brokenness, or if some wounds are just too deep to fully close. Thank you for listening to my story, for being here through the heartbreak and the questions. I'm eager to hear your thoughts as I try to figure out what comes next in this painful, confusing, and maybe hopeful part of my life.